There you go. So thank you very much for attending our presentation for today. We are going to do an important webinar on grant writing, and this is specifically targeted towards students and young professionals. And we are very happy to have excellent speakers who have been winning many grants, and they are also very young. So I would like to introduce who they are. Later on, they will have their presentations. So we have a number of our global health focus graduates and leaders, and all of them are from Africa. We have our lady from Nigeria, Alaran Aishat, who will talk about her winning her grant later on. And then we are also honored to have Adibisi Yusuf, who is our Director of Research at Global Health Focus, who has been our poster boy for research in Africa. And then we also have another leader of Global Health Focus, Isaac, who has been winning also a number of grants, and he will be speaking his experiences. And we have Ilyas from Malawi, who will also discuss his winning about winning his grant with the Royal Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. I understand many of you are attending this webinar because you are developing grants, writing grants, so that you'll be able to win grants, which will help you prepare for your careers in the future. And just to introduce Global Health Focus, I am Don. I'm the founder and managing director of Global Health Focus. I have been working in my entire life in my professional life, writing grants, and I have reached almost beyond 2.5 million US dollars of grants. So I'm also going to share the experiences of winning grants from at a student level and to a professional level. This will be an informal presentation. You can always feel free to ask questions. You can write your questions on the chat box, and we have our staff who will be telling me if there are questions that will come along. So feel free to ask questions as early as now. We will have enough time to have an open forum and discussions and presentations by our panelists. But I will start with a lecture as part of this webinar. And thank you very much to Anikan, who is our Global Health Focus leader. This is one of our first few webinars, and he developed this concept on ideation, development, and positioning strategies for a successful grant application. I am, by the way, here in Manila, Philippines, and as I mentioned earlier, we are on a strict lockdown, which the president just announced that it will be extended for another week. So when we say strict lockdown, that means there's a curfew at 6 p.m. You cannot go out, and it ends at 5, and then all the stores and everything is almost closed. Okay, so again, welcome to the GHF webinar on grant writing. And just to introduce Global Health Focus, we have been working a lot in Africa and Asia and parts of Europe because we are developing a community of thinkers, leaders, and innovators. So writing grants is part of our framework where we develop emerging leaders in global health, and that has got to do with being a thinker and being a researcher. So we have been very successful in our work with doing research. However, we have to sustain our research work by through developing and writing grants. And what is the point of grant writing? So the word grant writing is just a very general term. So why do we write grants? First of all, it might be something that is a response to a call, and there are so many of them. There are always many calls which are meant for young professionals, students like you, and some of you who are here already professionals, or you have a valuable research to do. That's why you want to write a grant. So you have a very big idea and you want to share and you want to develop that idea and you want research money. So grant can mean a number of things. It can be a travel grant if you want to attend a conference. It can be a research grant if you want to do research. It can be a project grant if you want to fund a project. It can be an educational grant if you want to study a certain program, a master's or a certificate course. And at Global Health Focus, we receive so many of these requests where they can write grants. And that's why one of the reasons why you write a grant is you want to build a nonprofit. We receive so many of this. So you have a good project on non-communicable diseases and you want to build a nonprofit out of it so that you can implement programs in the community. Therefore, you have this grand idea and you want to put money on it. However, of course, it should not be your personal money. Therefore, you look for the right agencies and right organizations and funding bodies where you can develop a grant and send to them and hoping that your proposal will be funded. So let's say that writing a grant is writing a proposal. It can be a project proposal or a research proposal. So that is what we have been doing actually at Global Health Focus. That's the reason why we are able to sustain it. We have to travel a lot to different countries, and therefore we have to pay for airfares, even for your meals, for those who graduated from our Emerging Leaders program, for the hotels. It is very expensive, even for printing the certificates, because most of our programs are provided for free. And you want to develop a community resource. That's why you want to write a grant. So that can be an example. So let us just think that writing a grant is really looking for resources, whether it is money, financial, or whether it will be in kind or goods. If you're going to give, let's say you're going to have a program to provide services to population affected by a disaster. Now, for some of you, you are young professionals, young academics, and you want to build a research center. And most of your researches will be based on grants. And this is why we're going to do this webinar. So probably that is your plan. And of course, most of you, we are developing you to become emerging leaders in global health. You want to increase your grant profile, because you want to be promoted fast in the institutions where you are. This is specifically, of course, for me, who is in the academe. And you know very well that in many universities, the amount of money that you will bring into your university through a research income or grant is what will help you get promoted through the ranks of the academe. So from a lecturer to assistant professor to associate professor to full professor. You are going to send these grants to funding bodies, and there are so many in every country and globally. And as you rake in more income through research grants, then you go through the ladder of the academic of academic promotion. And these grants will be converted into projects, or they will be converted into PhD scholarships, or they can be converted into just anything as long as it's an academic endeavor. And then you go promoted in your work. And these are in many universities, the major criteria to be promoted. They are having the income for the university. So as the more money you have, the faster you will be promoted. Therefore, as early, but they will only count, of course, the money that is brought to your current university. However, on your profile as a student right now, until you apply for your to become a lecturer, then your profile on your CV will already start counting. So whatever the grant you receive, whether it's a travel grant to attend a conference for the HIV/AIDS conference, for example, you can start writing them. So travel grant is also one of them. If you have a research grant, then you start adding them on your CV. If you are given a grant not competitive, you still can add them as long as there's a title for that. And then if you become the head of a university, let's say you're the president or the vice chancellor, your income would also depend on the income of the university. So that's the reason why there are university presidents who earn as much as 5 million US dollars a year, or a university in the UK would provide you an income of 1,800,000 pounds to 1 million pounds in a year. That's also based on the grants that the whole university would receive, because a big part of these grants will be channeled towards human resources. So the bigger the amount of money you'll get, the more human resources that you can hire. Therefore, if you have more staff and more employees, you can do more research. So it's basically, that's basically the framework of grants. And there are so many of them. Another reason why we have to do grants, especially if you're higher ranked in a university or you run a research center, you want to build the infrastructure of the university. So you write grants because you want a research building, and part of the research building will be classrooms or gadgets or apparatus. And once the grant is finished, those infrastructure will be given to the university as a donation. So if you keep on doing this and doing this every year, then therefore you will just accumulate infrastructure for the university. So that is why we are now trying to encourage you young professionals and professionals who are here in this webinar, that as early and as young as you are, learn how to develop, how to write grants. You can start with a few $100s, and then eventually it will reach to millions in the future when you become more professional. The good news is, as young as our speakers right now, they're still very young, they already have been accumulating a lot of grants. And the good thing for them is, even if they are still in the undergrads, if your grant would contain laptops or salaries, this will be actually a good income for you. Because I'm going to tell you now, a big percentage of the grant would go to the salaries of the staff, including you, who will be the principal investigator. So if you come from a developing country, that's a very good strategy to put your salary there at an international rate. Therefore, you will have a bigger income from the grant when you receive it. So there are all positive things in getting a grant. And of course, being able to write a grant, you have a big responsibility towards it, because you will be audited, so on and so forth, depends on the report. Okay? So far, no question. Anthony? Okay, someone is monitoring the chat. I will go to my first slide. So before you start writing your grant, you have to understand the following. First, you develop a specific, meaningful, actionable plan for what you want to do and why you want to do it. Do not go beyond their call for grants, because sometimes we keep on writing on many things, but if it is beyond the scope, then your grant will not be granted. Consider how your plan will achieve positive results. So be very concise, direct to the point, and then eventually look at the outputs on what you are writing. Then locate a granting organization if it is not a call, or source that funds projects like the one you have in mind. Actually, most of you, the ones we receive is, I received this acceptance for a university, but I don't have money for the tuition. Okay, maybe one of you will ask that later on. We have been successful based on our mentorship only probably with 3 individuals who applied for master's scholarships, but did not get the scholarship. Eventually, they were accepted by the university, but no payment for the master's tuition. Luckily, we were able to find a foundation for them, but that is very that's quite rare. So, but that is an educational grant. If it is a research, that organization to make sure that its mission aligns with your plan. So do not send a grant proposal if that is not aligned with what they want. For example, for my PhD, I was funded by the Nippon Foundation and my research was on maritime health because that is the funding that they want. They want to fund ocean research, research related to the seas, and therefore you have to write a grant that is related to what the organization wants. Do not just write anything if that is not what they want, or else it's a waste of time. And of course, you will have a bad name. Later on, they will not fund you anymore if you do that strategy. So you have to review the organization's proposal guidelines. This is very important. So what are the guidelines? The number of words, the topic that they want. Is it laboratory-based research or is it population research? Someone is asking if there will be a break. Yes, we will have a break later on. But we are recording this and we will post this online so that those who are not able to attend due to time reasons, they will be able to go back to the video. Examine sample proposals from your department, peers, or your organization, and also the proposals if they are provided by the funding organization. Now, why are there so many funding bodies in the world? One is the world has been getting richer and richer before the pandemic. So there are many organizations which would channel their income. Instead of paying taxes, they will put it into the foundation and release it as grants, whether it's to provide services, so on and so forth. So that's the reason why during the COVID pandemic or during epidemics or disasters, there's a lot of money that is being provided. But your goal now is really how to write a winning grant so that you will get the money that you want or the funding that you want. And as I mentioned, the world is getting richer from, as you would notice with the Gates Foundation, is now a trillionaire or a billionaire. Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, they are just putting a lot of money. But how to get those money that they are providing as grants, so that is the way you will strategize with your grant writing, okay? So the first thing that you have to consider is to consider the audience, the purpose, and the expectations of a grant proposal. So who is your audience? Is it the research community? Or if it is a grant request for a disasters, be sure that it's a disaster that is very prominent. I received a grant. As I said, so far I am already nearing to 3 million, my accumulated grant amount that I have received, and it varies from surgery to disasters to universal health coverage to health systems to strengthening health systems, education, and you have to be very good in writing these grants. I have received from as small as 5,000 US dollars for travel grants to as much as 1 million for a global research grant, whether I'm a co-PI or the main PI. So it will vary later on. But of course, it will be good if you will be able to receive the big amount of money because it will last for many, many years. So understand who your audience is. So if it's, as I mentioned, if it's a disaster and they want research, then it will touch upon these people. If it is an educational grant, which we have been receiving with Global Health Focus, then it will be the audience that you will be trained in terms of the grant proposal that you are writing. What are the particular expectations for this grant? So here we want to understand the outputs that they want. For example, If it is an educational grant, you will be able to measure the indicators that they want. How many students or how many participants were trained? How many training programs or how many training workshops have been held? And what have been the impact? Impact can also be in different ways. So you have to understand the concept of indicators. How many man hours were done? How many speakers were you able to attend? How many countries were covered? So you have to be very specific on the expectations of the grant. When you say impact, it can also be what have been the behavioral changes. So this will reflect on the proposal that you have so that you will know what will be the methods written and then eventually what will be the output. We'll go to that later on. Then how do you establish your credibility? This is very important because there are lots of individuals who are there just for the money, and they are not there actually to implement programs. So if you don't have an organization which has a name, you can partner with an organization which is established in terms of its credibility. Everyone knows the organization or everyone knows the person. So for example, when you have this, when you discuss credibility, sometimes you have to append the CVs of the principal investigator and the possible staff members of the grant proposal, especially if it's a research. If it's an organization that has got to do with the grant, there will be an auditing system, for example. So Global Health Focus will be happy to accommodate some of you if you have grant proposals that you are planning to send. Grant proposals can also be actually research proposals or competitive research competitions where it is called for by international organizations like the UN or the WHO, and we have done a number of them. For my past work, I've been working for a few years for a think tank. This has been my major work on writing grants. How can you clearly and logically present your plan? This is very important. So you have to follow the grant proposal. There is no template with a grant proposal. If there is no template, then you can follow a research proposal or a project proposal format, and there are so many of them online. Some proposals will just ask questions and you have to answer them based on every question that they will ask. So sometimes there are boxes and then they will ask the question and you have to answer them. So there's really no plan. If it is a proposal that has to follow a certain framework, it has to be logical. So how do you make it logical? From the title to the major objective and to the minor objective, to the methodology, to the action plans, and to the Gantt chart. So you already know what a Gantt chart is, to the outputs, indicators, etc. They are all interrelated. They should not, you start with the main objective of the project that you want or the research that you want, and everything else should follow. So if it starts with a research question or a problem statement, your objectives should be able to answer the problem statement. Your methods should follow the objectives, and then the activities should follow every objective that you're going to answer or to achieve. Now, if it's an action-based plan, then the different activities should be able to meet the objectives. So that is how to make it clear and logical. As early as now, I want to tell you the reasons why we have been winning grants is the use of frameworks, conceptual framework, or just any theoretical concept that you want to use. For example, if it is something that has got to do of changing a certain phenomenon from bad to good, you can use theory of change, for example. By using a number of concepts or theories, that will make your proposal very strong because it shows that you are quite academic and intellectual. So there are so many kinds of frameworks, whether it's a framework, logical framework if it's an EU grant, or just simply some of the simple frameworks like theory of change that you want to use. Try to put them in one of the paragraphs, and that will make a very strong proposal. And another thing is using Gantt chart. Using a Gantt chart will show that you are very specific with the timetable. So you just Google what a Gantt chart is, and it will show you the logic of the flow of your of your grant proposal. And another thing will be the use of diagrams and drawings. So for your conceptual framework, sometimes you have to use it, or your theoretical framework, and even just for your simple framework that you want to use, you can use that. So try to put some additional frameworks, and it will really help in your grant proposal. Of course, you have to limit the number of words because you can have many things there, but if some parts are already lacking because of the limitation of the number of words, then you will have a problem. So you really have to cut on that. So common elements of a grant proposal, there will be a short overview. So it's like a summary. What exactly is contained in your grant proposal? Do not do this one thing which I've noticed with our GHF network when they write their research papers. The abstract or the summary is an introduction. Do not do that. It's not an introduction. It is a summary of everything of the body. Because sometimes people will just copy the introduction and that becomes the short overview. The short overview will be from the very start to the very end in a short version. Then, if it is specifically if it's a project proposal or a project grant or a research grant, you specify the problem. What is it that you want to change? What is the need of the community that you want to highlight? For example, is it alcoholism within the community? Is it drug abuse? Therefore, one of the ways to win is, in the introduction, is to have a good literature review, which means you also have to have references and in-text citations of the things that you will reference, and that will make your grant intellectual. This is one thing people forget, that you can still put your citations on the body and then eventually have references. So that means you are quite intellectual when you submit the grants. Some people do not just write references because they say, oh, this is not a research paper. I don't want to place references. It will really show how intellectual you are if you add reference. You don't have to have many. 5 would be enough, 10 would be okay, probably not 50 because the references will be longer than the grant proposal itself. Description of your project. So this is now the body of your paper. Okay, it looks like we have many participants in this webinar. We have 92, plus later on it will be published online. So I hope we will be helping you out. And description of the project, be clear, concise, and complete. Be very, very specific. And please, again, as I mentioned, do not keep on writing many things which are not necessary. Okay? Now, very important, the budget. This is always what makes you win. If it is a grant that has specific amount of money, you can maximize it. So if it's just 10,000 US dollars, then you can maximize that amount. Okay, is it big, 10,000 US dollars? At a student level, yes, it is big. But at a professional level, no, it's not, because we can write grants worth 20 million US dollars. Okay? Imagine, if you have to write a grant of 20 million US dollars, how can you consume it in just a few years? Let's say 3 years, for example. It's actually one hell of a thing to do the budget. If it's just a small amount, your problem is how to maximize that amount of money. So for example, DBC has been winning, I think the first thing he won was 10,000, then he won another 10,000 US dollars. And you have to be very specific of the currency, if it's US dollars or pounds. We normally use US dollars because it's a universal amount in many grants. If it's British, of course, you have to have pounds, and euros if it's in the Eurozone. You have to be very specific, especially if you have to convert the amount of money, let's say being implemented in Nigeria or in Uganda or in Sudan. It has to be translated into US dollars. Be very, very careful because you just cannot put a local currency. They won't understand that. So the budget, there will be restrictions. Sometimes some grants do not want salaries. If they don't want salaries, but there are sometimes things written that if it is really necessary for salaries or honorarium, then you place it. Your question is, how much should I place in terms of the amount of money for the salary? Then you have to perfect the skill because this is something very important. You know why? If it is an international grant and it is a big amount of money, for example, at London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, we are not, the faculty members are not allowed to go for grants below 50,000 pounds because it's a small amount of money and a big percentage would go only towards the secretary. So they go more for the millions of pounds and dollars, and it will be, and sometimes it's really a lot of work for the grant writing. So, but for you, I think 10,000 would be fine. I think at DBC, he will explain later on that he won 25,000 recently, US dollars, for another grant. And for the Royal Society, which I think our speakers will talk about, that's 5,000 pounds. Now, what will you include in the budget? It really would depend on what you want in order to achieve the goals. For example, if it is research, and it will be a population-based study, that means you're going to do a survey of 5,000 individuals or even just 2,000 individuals, you will need a laptop. Therefore, you'll put on your budget a laptop. Which laptop would you buy? It depends on you, of course. If you have to do, for example, figures, drawings, so on, videos, then a MacBook will be fine. So you have to be very smart. Actually, this is where you now accumulate some of your, well, come to think of it, some of the things that you will write on your proposal, it goes to you, and therefore the laptop will be your property later on. For example, if you're going to do a survey and you will need to hire 5 research assistants who will go to the field, then you need to buy them a tablet. Then you will need 5 tablets. And that tablet will now be given to you after the project. So that's the same thing with the other things that we buy, that we procure as a principal investigator. So if there's a need for a classroom or a building, then that building, you cannot return a building to the funder because you cannot uproot the building and send it back to UK. It will be there and it will be owned by your organization. So that's the same thing with your PCR machines, with your laptops, with the automobiles that you will buy, all the air conditioners. And that is one of the strategies of universities why they develop all this infrastructure. So again, the budget would depend on what you want, and just go online for the specific budgeting. For human resources, if you are the principal investigator, maybe I ask you a question so that I can see your responses. If it is a British grant, and let's say you are a professor from Nigeria, what salary will you use? Nigerian rate or British rate? Okay. Anyone who wants to answer so I can hear your voice? Maybe unmute. Who raised his hand? Okay, Mashkur. Can you unmute Mashkur? Mashkur, are you unmuted now? What's your answer?
I will use a British rate.
If it's a Nigerian...
Because at the end of the day, it's pounds. So the funders are they need to know the value in pounds.
So which means it will be the rate of your professor in UK for the salary. If it's a full-time, let's say 2 years grant, that will be the rate of the professor in the UK, yes or no? Of a Nigerian principal investigator.
No, it will be the salary rate the professor is getting in Nigeria, but calculated in pounds.
Aha, okay. You are not very smart. You will lose money. It will depend. Oh, we have now more than 100 participants. It will depend. So this is now where it is tricky. If it is an international grant and it allows international rate, therefore you have to use the international rate, which is normally the WHO rate, even if you are a professor from the developing world. The only tricky part is with your local university. Will your university, because remember, they will be the ones to receive it. Is there a law that says you're only supposed to receive the amount of a Nigerian professor? So even if I give you 10,000 US dollars, 10,000 pounds for 1 month salary for that specific grant, what will be released by the university in Nigeria will be the local rate. So therefore, you are actually accumulating savings. You get the point? So therefore, you have to be very smart in writing the budget. You can extend the budget, you can have more staff, but you have to be able to justify it. Can you make changes with the grant? Yes, you can, but don't make it too obvious that you are rigging the budget, because that will become corruption. Of course, you have to ask permission. So grants will have what you call the overhead. And this is where the universities or the organizations make money. It's like you are selling something, you put an extra amount of money. Normally, this amount of money is 30%. It can be as small as 10%. So if the total budget is $1 million, you can put 10% overhead. And that overhead does not go anywhere except to the organization. 10% is actually quite low. You can go as much as 30%. Some organizations would allow 50%. That means half of the budget. So if it's 100,000 US dollars, if the overhead is 30%, 30,000 pounds will be, or dollars, will become an income of the organization. That means you can spend it on anything, or that will be the buffer. You can include that in the budget. Okay? So that's why you have to be very careful. So that is the reason why consultants earn a lot of money because of this. That will be another webinar that we will do for the emerging leaders and emerging consultants on how to navigate your career in global health. So that is the reason why I've been pushing you for many years now that research can really make a good income and career for you because of all these research grants. You will not go poor with being a researcher. And there are other questions. So that's the budget. There are so many details on that. And we can just go to in another webinar on the details of budgeting, which is another specialty of mine on funding and financing researches and programs. So other things that you have to remember, cover letter is very important. So many of you have been writing researches and publications and manuscripts with us. Remember, cover letter is always very important. Why you don't need, why you are submitting these researches and why you cannot pay the APC. And mind you, before I forget, the reason why we have been publishing is because we want you to have a very strong profile when you write grants. So they are related with your research profile. So I, as a funding body, if I check on you on ORCID or on Google Scholar, that you say that you have been doing research, there it will be reflected on what you have been doing. Never, never lie on your CV. So if you say that I've been doing HIV/AIDS work, then I have been publishing on HIV/AIDS, I will check all the social media about your work. So that's the reason why you build an online profile, whether it's on Twitter or Orsid or Facebook or whichever. You know, even if you get a visa for the United States, they will ask your Facebook account because they will check it. So do not put many bullshit things in your social media. Put good things because you are building a profile. And eventually, if you apply for jobs, you can put the grants there, and therefore you have a good online profile. Then check the organizational qualifications if you are applying as an organization, and all the supporting documents such as registration, capability of the organization, TB programs. There are so many of them. I've seen many organizations winning TB programs. You have to put all the profile. If you do not have that, because it's a chicken and egg question, you don't have a good background, then you have to have partnerships with organizations like Global Health Focus or any other organization which have a good profile. Okay? And general tips, this will be my last slide before we go to the experiences of our other speakers. Pay attention to the agency's key interests. Is it child abuse? For example, Nippon Foundation is interested in maritime health and in health programs. Or Tokyo Foundation is interested in leprosy. Gates Foundation it depends on their call. That's the same thing with the Rockefeller Foundation. There are so many foundations. Every major company has a foundation. Whether it's give me a company, there will always be a foundation and they have a certain focus. If you're asking for youth activities, there are so many foundations which are funding youth activities. Same with researches. And then there are also those which fund the big research grants, such as the MRC, Medical Research Council of the UK, Norwegian bodies, most of the European programs, most of the European governments fund this. Your question is, how can I as a student apply to this? Okay, there might be some limitations as students or young professionals, but there are also bodies which will provide you on these things. I will show you some few slides as examples. Organize ideas through numbered lists. So if there's a need to place 1, 2, 3, 4, then you write them. Write carefully customized proposals. Customized means it is according to what they want. And then go after grants of all sizes. Remember, Adibisi Adibisi, are you there? Are you rich now? You have been receiving lots of grants. When he writes grants, he just tells like, oh, Don, I won 10,000 for this grant. He will explain it later on. Oh, I won this 5,000 pounds for this grant. So what are you going to do with the grant? I'm just going to do a desk research. So that means he will just stay at home and write and use the internet. Therefore, I need a laptop. I need an internet connection. And I will put a salary for myself. And I'll just be at home because it's COVID, it's pandemic. Then I have this 5,000 pounds grant. Then we just submitted the research output. And then that's it. Where else do you put the money? Well, you bought your laptop. You bought your... Okay, so go for all... Yes, there's a question.
There is a question coming from Abdul Mujib Ilumsa. If one doesn't have interest in research, what other opportunities are open? Is research the only way to get to work for these bodies?
Okay, as I mentioned, there are different kinds of grants. So the question is, if it's not research, if it's not a research grant, what kind of grants do we have to apply for? As I mentioned, there are so many. Project grant, or infrastructure development, or travel grant. There are so many of them. So there are also leadership grants, which you can apply for. So it depends. As a young leader or as a young professional, you want to do many things. The only thing is you're poor. That's why you're still young. I'm just joking. I know some of you are rich. So that's where you have to be very smart. I have this grand idea, but I don't have the money. And therefore, I have this budget. Where do I get the money for this project? So that is where you have to think and you have to find out where they are. In fact, there are many websites where you can get these grants. Do grants of all sizes. I am normally ambitious with writing grants because that's part of my work. I go for 2 million grant proposals or as small as, because I have so many projects from surgery. I am the director of two organizations working in surgery. Then you have Global Health Focus, which needs a lot of money because we have to pay a number of staff and their communication allowance. Those are just secrets. We are actually have a number of people we to run the organization. And of course, communication is very important. So you have to prepare all this budget. My travel to Africa that eats a lot of money. Airfares eat a lot of money. So those are the things you have to prepare. So go for all sizes and never give up. Keep on writing. So before the next question, I will just finish the slides. These are just some examples. So this is a grant that we won as an organization, the one that I led, a global development network. This is 30,000 US dollars, and everyone could apply. And we won the grant of 30,000 US dollars. There was first, second, third, and it was just on knowledge for sustainability. And it was a health research policy kind of grant. So that was quite easy, just a few pages. And then we won it. And the winner has to travel, one of my staff had to travel to Bonn, Germany to receive the grant. You see, and then you advertise it, and then you now have a very good profile internationally. This one is worth 1 million. And many organizations submitted, and there were many stages. The first stage is, I think, $100,000, and then 10 organizations got it. And eventually the best one to scale it up won 1 million. What to do with food security in 2050. That's it, very simple. You can just think of anything, and if you were a young organization, then you could have won this. So there was already a winner on this. This is what many of you are interested. There will be a deadline for this. I think some of you are attending this because of this Royal Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. This one is for all the students. Global Health Focus network members have been winning this, and this is 5,000 pounds. So you check the winners, and this is where we're going to, our speakers will provide advice. And this slide is what the BC, ISHAT, and ISAC won. And a DBC won again for the scale up. So the first grant is 10,000 US dollars. And the scale up is 25,000 US dollars. And then you get a free trip to go to Poland. Unfortunately, there was COVID. And so it really multiplies. So in terms of my grant, it's online. What I have been receiving, as I mentioned, I've been doing this. And it has been a lot of organizations that have been funding. And I noticed that if I put all those frameworks, references, very logical flow of the proposal, that those have been our magic things that would really make the proposal very strong. And of course, you ask advice from individuals who have been winning, or your professors, or Global Health Focus. We'll be happy to give you advice on this. For example, I know you understand, Global Fund for TB, HIV, and malaria. Sometimes countries do not have the capacity, or NGOs. There are organizations that write the grant for you, and they will ask a professional fee for that. That's allowed, and that will be placed on the budget. That can be your work later on, because you can ask a certain percentage on developing the proposal. And mind you, also the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, there are so many grants that will be available for you. Like Mashkur is finishing his master's. I think Michael is already finishing his master. He already finished one before. You are ready now to write proposals, compete for grants after a master's degree. But for the undergrads, you can already do that at this very stage. Okay, that's the end of the slides. I